I believe that the foundation of every retirement plan has to be including reliable income. A couple came back into the office a while back. Let's call them Jim and Carol. They were in their early 60s. They'd saved up about $900,000 in various investment accounts. And, on paper, I would say they look great, right? Here's what kept Jim up at night, and that is outside of Social Security, none of their retirement income was considered reliable income. So it was a combination of stocks and bonds. And ultimately, every time they wanted groceries, if they wanted to take a trip, if they needed to fix their roof, they were selling some of their investments to do that. And in a shaky market, they felt like they were pulling money out of a leaking bucket. And, that was one of the big problems of just having a pile of money and picking at it. In fact, I've done a lot of these series and talking to them before. I'm Nolan Baker with America's Retirement Headquarters. And as a fiduciary firm, for over the past 30 years, we've been helping teach people how to retire. And if you're in this type of situation, one of the other potential negatives that you have is that fear could cause you to underspend in retirement time more than what you actually could. And you could wake up later in life and have realized that you could have had, much more income as enjoyable. So this is why I want to talk to you a little bit about the importance of building that reliable income. I want to talk to you about, do you know what your income gap is in retirement time? How do you figure it out? How do you close it out? And how do you look at your money in a little bit different way? And that's, again, the difference between having money and having income. In their situation at $900,000, you could say they have money, but his fear is he didn't have an income plan. And that's the gap that most people miss. So the philosophy behind reliable income that I help teach people is, number one, is you got to have enough reliable income to cover your essentials that you have in life. That predictable income, it could be Social Security, if you're blessed enough to have a pension. And then in addition to that, you could have, savings, dividends, rental income. You could have income that comes in from annuities, as an example. Those would be other reliable income sources. I'm talking about checks that come in every month, regardless of what the market's going to do. So your essential income, those need to be covered by reliable income sources, those things that don't flinch when the market drops. A scary market becomes uncomfortable then in that situation instead of catastrophic. So, what are some of the things that can kind of go wrong with that? Number one is most people fail to ever identify what their gap is in income needs. So Social Security, in a lot of situations, the average American, Social Security is going to replace, roughly 40% of what their pre-retirement income needs are. So, right out of the gate, what you have is more than half of your core spending that you're going to need is leaning on withdrawals from your savings account outside investment vehicles. And most people, they don't ever put a number to what that gap is. They just assume that their investment portfolio is going to take it. They've heard about the safe withdrawal rate of 4%. They just assume that they can take money out and they're going to cover that. But this is one of the most important numbers that I want you to figure out, what that gap in income need is to cover your essentials in life. So let's say that you have a need of $5,000 a month. And that $5,000 a month is to cover your essentials that you have in life, the non-negotiables, right? Your healthcare, your groceries, your food, your transportations. And let's say that between you and your spouse, you have $4,000 a month of income coming in. The difference between that is $1,000 a month. That $1,000 a month in that scenario is the gap that I'm talking about. So what you want to do is realize that then just leaning on your investments is a real risk. If you rely upon your stock and bond portfolio for everyday bills and they're not covered by reliable income, you could be forced in a situation to sell them while the market's down, exposing yourself to some of the worst possible damage when you do that. And that big drop in the first couple of years of an early retiree is, the problem of sequence of return risk. You're selling your shares at a down market. And so even when the market comes back, you have already done the damage. You typically don't fully recover from that. And that's a real big risk that retirees face. The third risk is longevity risk, right? This is a bigger risk than I think a lot of people think about. Most families, they really underestimate how long retirement's going to last. Your retirement could last 20, 25, 30 years. If you plan for, let's just say, an average life expectancy, you ran some calculator, you're basically getting a coin toss, right? Your plan could live longer than that, or it could, run out sooner. So everything depends upon how to draw out of your portfolio can be dangerous. There are investments that can help address longevity risk. And I think, making sure that you have enough reliable income that lasts for you and your spouse's lifetime can be very important as building in the plan. And the fourth one here is reliable income can make life simpler now, but it can also make life simpler later. And here's what I mean by that. If you have enough reliable income that's coming in every month to cover your essentials in life, and everything left over is for your fun stuff, are you able to sleep better at night knowing that you're moving into retirement time? Are you more comfortable knowing that all of your excess is just as you need it for the fun stuff in life? Probably, right? But reliable income can also be very beneficial for you later in life. So if you get later in life, again, I've helped people retire for over 30 years now. And so we've all kind of grown up and aged a little bit together. But as you get older in life, managing withdrawals, looking at rebalancing, deciding which investments to buy and sell, that gets harder as you age. The predictable paycheck, makes some of those years later in life a little bit easier, especially if somebody, begins to have some type of cognitive decline. It's the less that maybe you had to actively manage your money. It's less stress about worrying where that paycheck's coming from. It's less of a fear of making a mistake. And even sometimes it's less risk of somebody committing fraud upon you as well. So when you look at this, some of the studies out there say that you should have half of your income needs of reliable income. Is that the number that you should use? What I want you to do is I want you to figure out what is your income needs in retirement time. One of the exercises that we can run through together is helping you figure out what your gap is, and we can do that by going through our written retirement income plan. In that written retirement income plan, what we can do is help you figure out what your gap is, what your current coverage ratio is of that gap, and then develop a plan that says how, if anything, should we adjust, and how does that impact the overall plan. That's exactly what we figure out in that complimentary written retirement income plan. We'll calculate your coverage ratios. We'll talk to you about your gaps. We'll walk you through your different options, even like when to take Social Security and what could be your best approach. Because a nest egg in a balance doesn't tell you what your income is. It just simply tells you what you have. The coverage ratio is going to be a way to allow you to sleep well at night and give you overall confidence about your plan.